So we'll use a new sheet here. Okay. So Spring Boot or Spring Boot basically is based on Spring Framework. It simplifies as project creation, integration, building, packaging, and running. So, and it is opinionated, which means it is heavily based on the suggestion. So if you put a little bit of indication,
Yeah.
it
So
will
it will complete everything.
so it will try to figure out many things by itself and fulfill that kind of uh, requirements. So how does it do? It's either based on annotations. So we were seeing override, right? At override. So that is one of the annotation in a Java.
Annotation. Yes.
Yes, in Spring Boot, there are lot of things which comes under the configurations, right? So uh, creation, integration, configuration, not to forget, because that's the very large part in the Spring. So it takes that annotation or the resources, which can be properties file, ideally properties file, okay, or YAML file, okay, dot properties or YAML file. So it takes the opinion from annotation, resources like a properties YAML file or pom file, pom.xml.
Yes.
So this is dependency manager. So that's a separate topic actually. So there are a lot of things which comes under the Spring Boot. So in short, like all the dependency management is done by this guy, Maven. So Maven is a tool which helps to manage dependencies in project. This is the one of the job, but there are several other responsibilities which Maven owns. Other thing is how to basically maintain this builds actually, right? So how you maintain the build. So you either, right, you have to like compile package, right, deploy, not deploy, publish. This kind of life cycle steps are there with the Maven, which helps it to basically perform this kind of duties. Like Maven is a all in a one application or application tool, which is going to help you to basically maintain your project manage dependencies. Like your project, when you write your project, you can have the what could be the dependencies actually. Let's define the dependencies. So the dependencies could,
Types of dependencies. Okay.
sorry,
Types of dependencies.
yeah. So what could be the different types of dependencies? I can need I need uh, DB connectivity, right? DB to connect. And this DB is like a database, right? No, so DB
Yes.
is different DB. You have types of databases. So all of the type it is going to bother about. So you say MySQL DB, Oracle DB, any of these databases, you say Oracle database or MySQL database, or you say PostgreSQL database. You have DB2. There's so many, and on top of that, AWS has RDS. You might have heard about like an RDS DBs. So RDS are nothing but a wrapper on all this, right? So it manages this kind of. So this is like a Maven for the databases. So dependencies can be anything. This is one sort of dependency. Secondly, could be the dependency while you are writing your smart home garage management or smart home locking system, security system. What basically you are depending on, like security, right? You need a security. What I need is a security. I need a security libraries, right? Right? You might have used some kind of cryptos, right? Or JAS, we say Java Authentication Authorization Framework, or the or the or this kind of like algorithms, right? Any such things which helps you to generate the key, maintain the key for that guy, identify that guy with some signatures. So you may need kind of biometric or sensors, right?
Yes.
Which will detect some movement and then try to scan. You may need a camera driver, right? So these drivers are just like when you plug your uh, pen drive to the laptop, the pen drive is going to detect that there is a, sorry, the laptop is going to detect there is a pen drive attached. So it requires a software. So that software you call it as a driver, and this driver can be written in a specific language that you're writing a program. So maybe I'm writing a program in a Java, so I need a sensor driver in a Java which is compatible. So these kind of dependencies are basically managed by pom file, and pom file is nothing but it's a maven which takes the pom file. It's a maven which is taking the pom file and basically maintaining all these things. So it will allow you to make an entry of those uh, dependencies, like whatever your file, what your system is depending on, and all those underlying dependencies. Like, no, you cannot write all the codes by yourself, right? Java gives you a certain things as part of JDK. It gives you certain libraries, certain classes, but beyond that, suppose if you want to write this the use case that you have, then definitely you would have managed all this, right? You have to manage all of them. So how effectively do you manage? You use the Maven kind of tool, which is nothing but a simple XML. It's a one file XML, nothing more in a Maven actually. It is just a one file which is pom.xml. Under that, you just mention how this, which version of this libraries you want, right? So you basically deal with three things in here when you are dealing with Maven. You have artifact, artifact name, which group it is, and the version. These three things becomes main. So name of the artifact could be, suppose if we use the MySQL, then it should be the MySQL JDBC whatever, right? So we say MySQL JDBC. Then which group it is coming from? So this belong to a particular group, because one organization or one institute can give you multiple types of softwares. So there should be some groups to say that this is the umbrella under that all these artifacts are released, and artifacts are just a library. Okay, so artifact libraries, final war file, final jar file, these are just a concepts which can be basically, those are like an analogy. You can understand it, it's just an analogy. Libraries, artifact, all those are used for the same purpose. Similar kind of meaning you can conclude to. So artifact name, group name, and version. Version is like, suppose if I have some upgrade, I'll increase the number of like a Java, right? Java has a version. So Java 17, 18 is something into the market right now. So each time they add some extra software into that, extra classes into that, they will increase the release number or version, so that you can easily identify, like, each version has some kind of impact also. So you might not be willing to switch to the next until unless you have a good reason for that. So those comes as a version. So Maven uses these three informations to manage all the softwares that you need. Now coming back to the Spring Boot. Spring Boot is heavily opinionated, and it takes either annotation, resources which you put it into the properties file or YAML file. If you put something like I need to have this MongoDB connectivity. If you put the connection strings into the properties, it is just going to keep those classes loaded and connection ready for you. You have to just say object, refer that object, and then start doing it. Suppose if you're using messaging queue, Kafka, or any caching systems, right? Which can be your, say, Kafka. You know Kafka, right? Kafka.
Yeah, I never used it, but I know.
Yes. So Kafka Cues, which also there are a lot of tool actually. So you have to just get hold of
RabbitMQ.
RabbitMQ, uh, MQ, etc. So these kind of queues, if you need to connect to, or there are possibility that you might be dealing with some cache services. Cache services could be Redis cache, right? So if you need such things, or you need something like storage services, right? So you have a S3, correct?
Yes.
Have AWS S3, AWS S3. So you need, there are so many things, right? The list is endless. This
Okay.
this goes on. There is never ending list, right? So there are a lot of things which comes. So now how Spring is managing? Spring says I want to delegate the responsibility to Maven. So it uses Maven to handle all these kind of requirements here. And to build the objects, it is basically takes a combination of annotation and resources. It will look into the resources, it will look into the annotation, and see if there is anything indicating me to bring the proactively bring the object of these types. Like, no, I want to connect to S3, so it will automatically make a S3 object, right? For the connection, it will make a connection and give a, I mean, it will initialize the connection, and it will make it ready and give it to you, so that whenever your program tries to refer it, it is ready. Okay, so that is how it simplifies all of the need and basic things in the Spring framework actually. But at the bottom layer, it is using the Spring framework itself. So it doesn't use something else at the whatever Spring Boot supports. So whatever you will see in the Spring Boot, Spring framework is basically a very large framework. But what was the problem actually? Why people didn't, I mean, why people do not want to continue with the Spring framework is basically to complete any of the tasks, you have to do a lot of configurations, lot of boilerplate things. Actually, people refer the boilerplates or ceremonial codes. This kind of terminology people use it to refer to the piece of code or piece of work which is not required commonly to be done by the developer. Actually, those are the kind of common code which is not a business deliverables. So as a end developer, what you are expected to do is you take a client requirement and you just write the code for those client requirements. You should not basically spend a lot of time in a boilerplate or cutting concerns, right? So concerns, cross concerns, these are the terms actually. So all this ceremonial code, boilerplate, or whatever the different terms you use, it means that any additional code which can be delegated to platform like Spring framework should be owned by Spring framework. So Spring has addressed a lot of such problems, but it has also introduced its own challenges, like XMLs, annotations, all those things will come and basically pollute your code. Actually, you will find out lot of places Spring is started interfering with all these codes that you are writing for business. On top of that, you are writing a lot of code to make Spring understand that here you need a database connectivity, here you need a network connectivity, here you need to do some kind of uh, parsing using the Jackson libraries of like Java to JSON, JSON to Java. So this kind of conversion you are looking for. You are looking for a major date and time conversions. So all of these things that you are going to do, Spring used to have the either annotation based or earlier very conventionally they used to have a XML also. Still the XML is supported. But if you compare the code versus your configuration grows very faster. So Spring Boot tries to solve this kind of problem. And setting up the Spring projects are going to be taking a lot of time because each and everything you have to explain to Spring. So Spring Framework, when you are creating your project and trying to configure the Spring Framework into your project, it is going to take a lot of time because the first project that you will write, you will require each and every setup and binding, configuring, everything, configurations, everything you have to do by hand. And Spring Boot, in the other hand, it just sorts out. You just indicate me. I'll bring all those common configurations and supply it at the time of you are running the server or compiling the program. I'll not basically let you do all these jobs. So all the problems that Spring framework introduced, like configurations, lot of like a bloated code, lot of number of uh, annotation.
Boilerplate code is
Yes,
removed,
all this will be all these things will be cleaned out, not required. You just have a
which
one
is handled by Spring Boot.
Yes. So in the Spring Boot, you use one annotation for say multiple annotations or configurations in the Spring Boot in the Spring project. So Spring Boot still supports few of many of these Spring annotations which are meaningful, but many of them are kicked out actually. Those are like still there at the behind the scene, but at the top you will be dealing with the Spring Boot annotations. So coming back, how many modules, like what makes a Spring? So Spring is having something called Spring IOC. These are the different types of modules or different modules in the um, which is inversion.
Inversion of control.
Yes. What kind of problem it is solving actually? This is all managing your beans. Beans are nothing but a Java objects, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
it manages the object life cycle. That's all it does. But why this was a problem? Because once the Java objects are managed by the Java developers, it becomes a lot of mess. Basically, you don't know when to create. You remember the garbage collector, the number of memories objects are filling. All these problems becomes a major problem at one point. So Spring used to give a option where you don't have to create an object. You don't say new object. Let me decide, because you create a new object here, you go to the other class, you create a new object there of a same type, and then you go to some other class. You're creating so many object, man. I'll try to optimize it. I'll try to help you out with that kind of things. I'll create and keep the reference to me. You just ask me what type of object you want, right? I'll help you to keep one object for many, so that you will not end up filling up the memory and getting out of the space problems. So let me manage it more efficiently. So this is one of the module which helps you to control your bean creations. And bean is nothing but the object. Like when you someone says bean, bean is like just a object. Okay, next thing is Spring MVC, and MVC is like a model view
Mm.
and controller. Or
Here in Spring Boot, we have dependency injection, right?
this is
So,
the same thing, right? This is the dependency.
okay.
This is the
Inversion of control is same as dependency.
dependency.
Here,
Or
only whatever the object we have created with auto void, it can be used everywhere. That's
correct,
it.
correct,
And
right. So you auto you can add auto right? And you resolve your bean. You create bean, create service, create a controller, create a rest controller,
REST controller.
create a what else?
Component.
Component. Yeah, very good, So component like that, you create so many of the things. And these are ways to create a different types of objects. And these are very specific types. Auto-wire is just mentioning this particular declaration. I'm not going to create you. I want you to create and supply me. For example, you said database connectivity object. So it will say just name of the database connectivity class representation, right? So in suppose if there is a driver of MySQL which says DB MySQL connection dot
Yeah.
Java class. So it will say at the rate auto-wire
Right.
private.
MySQL connection variable name,
Right.
MySQL.
That's all. And then this guy is going to create for us. And how this guy will create for us? This guy will say, go write all this configuration and let me know how your database driver details and all everything will look like, which driver you will manage, what you want, what. So lot of question this guy will ask. So this guy, whatever he asks, this is kind of like a common question. It's like no all step 1 2 step 5 step 6, whatever you see the common question, that is something you can derive from, right? You don't have to ask a lot of question, like no, you don't have to ask my entire detail. What you need is my maybe Aadhaar card or basic information. If I give it to you, it is like a common information. You can determine most of my information through the basic information. So there is a fundamental information and there is a there's a composite or made informations. So those extra informations that can be derived from the few main information that you need. So that's what Spring Boot works on, right? So Spring Boot will just take a basic information. It is just going to ask you, can you tell me what kind of uh, configuration you need it, which package that configuration should apply to. Just give that annotation. Put the resources, like, no, I need, when I connect to database, I need the database driver URL. Otherwise, how I'll connect? I need a user ID, passwords, authentication mechanism, right? Otherwise, how I'll create? So give me that one. So you give that. And then it says in the pom file, just mention that, boss, which type of connectivity you would like, because I'll give you, like, no, you go to restaurant, you see the one uh if you want to eat one type of food, you have several varieties of it, right? So there can be several approaches to the particular type of the driver, or to the database you are asking for, because there will be probably the JPA way to connect it, or Spring JDBC way to connect it. When you are connecting to database, you can have a Hibernate integration, right? Or without Hibernate integrations, you can use the Spring Data. There is another module. So that is how it asks you a little bit hint, so that it can serve you better. So you have a Spring MVC, then you have a Spring ORM, which is object relation.
Wait.
Here you have
Hibernate. Okay. Okay.
concepts. What JPS can be solved through Hibernate or through anything else, so through the Spring Data also. So like in a ORM is like a one module, and product is like a Spring Data. So a Spring Data, either you can use it Spring Data JPA, or Hibernate, all these things, right? So there are so many possibilities. It doesn't restrict. The best part is it doesn't restrict. So to know the Spring Boot in a much detail, you should know what are there in the Spring security. So this allows you to do the authentication, authorization, right? You authenticate. Just one second.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So authentication, authorization. So these things are simplified, like, no, and this is all like, no, thin layers actually. This exactly allows you to plug and play many other things. It doesn't restrict most of these modules. They come up with the concept that where you can bring your own customization here. This is all extensible actually. This is all module. These all modules are serving one on kind of department, right? While you're developing your project, you have many of these things. And MVC, we forgot to mention that. So web application, right? So all this web application you write, which can run in possibly the server like Tomcats, right? So this guy is going to allow you to write your model, view, and controller. Views are basically the pages. So it can be JSP or HTML, right? Or all this view are also referred as a Angular JS, no, React. All these frameworks allows you to write your view. And models are like your business logic, and controller is like Java code, which can be your REST controller, like we were talking here, right? REST controller or any controller. So can be MVC controller. It will just take the first request when the view sends the request. When from the browser you send the request, it lands up here in the controller first. And then controller will decide like, no, whom should I navigate? It's just like, routing. So it is going to take a decision where this call should navigate to, right? So that is a controller. So when you write your web application, we should be compliant to run inside the Tomcat. Basically, this is like an external Tomcat. Like when you write your program, which is web application, you create a WAR file. In this sense, you basically create a WAR file. .war. WAR is like a web application, web archivals, web
Okay. Web
archival, right? That's the WAR. Basically, you write like this. So then other than that, you have a jar. So these things can be again simplified by Spring Boot. What it will do, it will take the WAR file kind of concept away from the Spring and say, I give you a little bit better thing. You had a external Tomcat. I'll give you a Tomcat which is embedded. So you don't have to worry about, because that's the job of Spring Boot, right? Let me simplify. It's like today it's simplifying everything. If you start your program, you can set up your basic first example within few seconds actually. It doesn't take a lot of time actually. So you have to just opinionate the Spring Boot. What you want? You want Tomcat server? Okay. Mention here. I want a Tomcat server. And what type of Tomcat server? Do you want a Tomcat server, or you want an alternative to the Tomcat server? Right? So there is an embedded Tomcat server, embedded Jetty server, right? There are three different application servers or web servers. This is under the category of web servers. So there are three different web servers provided here. So you just mention that I will provide you. In that case, you don't have to basically write the WAR file, because the WAR file is not deployed inside the Tomcat. Now this time what happens? The Java archival, the jar file, Java, JAR, Java archival files, archived files, basically, which we call it as the artifacts, will be generated. And that holds the Tomcat internally, which means when I run it, it has a very lightweighted Tomcat inside it. Got it? So when you run automatic, so that way it can run standalone. It doesn't require some external dependencies. It manages to that layer. That's the Spring Boot simplifies. So other than Spring security, you have a Spring AOP, respect oriented programming. Here, this is more of like you have a lot of NFR, right? It deals with the NFRs basically. NFR is non-functional requirement. So you have functional requirements, right? So functional requirements are basically when your project domain, if I take your example of your project domain, someone is giving you a specification, right? How they want. When they approach 5 feet closer, then this should happen, right? They will not tell you a lot of things like, I want a historical data of last 5 days, right?
Yes.
If something